Hi, so those of you who have subscribed to my channel, statisticsmentor.com, will know that in recent weeks I've been adding videos to do with uh, entering data into SPSS, entering questionnaire data in SPSS. And then one day I got this message from a viewer saying, "Oh, how do you set up um, SPSS to deal with Likert scales?" I was thinking to myself, oh, hasn't this person watched my video on questionnaire data entry? Because basically it's all in there. And then I thought to myself this morning, perhaps there's something I can add to that. So that gives me a reason to do this video. And the thing I can add to that is something called reverse coding, which if you're doing Likert scales you may have heard about from your professor. First of all, for those of you who don't know about this video, it's a good place to start. SPSS for newbies, questionnaire data entry. That's the first video I did about entering data, survey data, questionnaire data into SPSS. And there I kind of suggested you use SPSS rather than Excel because you get to bond with SPSS. After a few hours of playing or entering data in SPSS, you'll become a lot more comfortable with it. And that video is seems to be helping a lot of you. It's doing very well. It's got over 12,000 hits as I'm kind of looking at it today. So that's where you start. That's a good place to start, right? And then if you click on my channel name and then you go over to the SPSS for Newbies playlist, you'll see that I followed that video up with some other ones. Questionnaire data entry waiting cases, which if you may not need this one, so look at that, to treat that as optional. And then I followed up the questionnaire because it was doing so well the first video, your questions answered, because there were so many questions your viewers were asking me about that. So that'd be the next one to look at. And then I followed that one up by looking at Excel into SPSS. So how do you, if you're given data in Excel, how do you kind of import or take that over to SPSS without just using copy and paste, and how do you kind of do recoding if the data is coded in Excel? Alright, anyway, that's a place to get started if you want to kind of know more about entering data to SPSS. But today we're kind of going to look at Likert scales. So yeah, Likert scales is something you can use to measure attitudes. So let's give you an example here. A question. Let's call this a question. Let's write this down. So you might see this in a survey. I like SPSS. Okay, your answers could be, put a box here because it's a questionnaire, that you strongly agree, that you disagree, that you are undecided, that you agree, and that you strongly agree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. So we'll call this a 5-point Likert scale, so a scale of 1 to 5. Sorry, I didn't have to say on a scale from 1 to 5. It's on a 5-point scale anyway. Okay, so how do you set up SPSS to take data from this? Well, the thing is that anybody that comes along in your questionnaire, they're going to kind of mark a box. They might say, "Oh, I like SPSS. Do I agree?" Let's say yes. Let's say we do. Then how do you kind of enter this? How does SPSS deal with something like this? Well, how it deals with something like this is that we've got to do what is called, if we take this into SPSS, so let's say take this into SPSS, we have to do what is called coding. So to each answer I have to attach a number, okay, which just basically serves as a kind of a label. Now what we've got to know about this Likert scale is the scale, and what we can see here is that there's a strength of agreement, isn't there, of something. I like SPSS as you're going down here, the strength of agreement is increasing. That's going to be reflected by numbers. So let's say this is a bit, let's say 1. Let's say we assign the answer strongly agree, let's assign it 1. Disagree 2. Undecided 3. Agree 4. Strongly agree 5. So we could say that as the respondent ticks lower down, it means it's scoring higher. So in this case, the higher the score, that means the more positive attitude to SPSS. Positive attitude of this scale is negative attitude. Okay, let's show you how I'm going to do this in SPSS. So just let's see, strongly agree is going to be coded 1, okay, and so on. SPSS. Okay, here it is. Got 2 tabs. That's the data view, which takes the data. Variable view, I click on that. My first question is to do with attitude to SPSS at SPSS, say for short. And what I want to do is I want to go to values. This is where I set up the numbers and associate those numbers with the words. So if you recall, let's go back here, I said we're going to let strongly agree equal 1. So we write in the value box 1, and then where it says label we write strongly agree to that statement. And then we press add, and that takes it into this box here. So we know it's now being accepted. And then where do I go? I want to go back to the screen, right? Then 2, this disagree is going to be coded 2, so let's do that next. So value 2, disagree, add. And we keep doing this, so let's do another one. Undecided, that's coded 3. 3. Undecided. Anytime we make a spelling mistake, let's say I put undecid. Okay, I made a spelling mistake. How can I correct for that? Well, I can tick on this one, and you see it appears up here, right? And then you just correct it, undecided, and then I press change. Now it's corrected. And then can I just do the other ones, because you know what I'm going to do here. It's quicker if I just edit this. 4, that's going to be called agree. It's a piece of cake basically. 5, strongly agree. Add. And now I've got my 5 points. Would you believe it? That's all you have to do. So I press OK here. Now let's go to data view. Each row represents the kind of completed questionnaire of one person. So let's say, and I've only got one question in my survey so far. Well, the first person agreed, right? So that's 4, coded 4. So how do you deal with that? You don't write agree here in this box. You write 4, because 4 means agree. Okay. Say the second person hates the thing. So I like SPSS. I strongly. Oh, hang on. Strongly. I made a spelling mistake, so let's do that before you kind of all flood my email box. Strongly disagree. Okay, so let's say another person says they strongly disagree. I like SPSS. I strongly disagree. I hate it. So, which, let's see, some of you may do, but you have no choice but to use it. So here you go. All right, and so on. And that's all it is. Let's see if I can try. How about if we try to write agree there? It won't accept it. See? It makes a noise. It doesn't like it. One feature you might like to know is that some of you are not comfortable with seeing these letters. Well, we can flip back and forth between a code and what those codes, these numbers, i.e. stand for, by going up here and toggling. This where it says value labels, it goes back and forth between the values which we've got here and what the values actually stand for. So if I press here, see, 4 stands for agree. So look at that top line. See? So if you kind of want to feel reassurance that you're not entering rubbish, you're entering something which is making sense, you just press this and you can see what's going on. Good. Well, that's the first thing, but that was basically covered in my first in the questionnaire data entry video anyway. But what I'm adding here, which I didn't do there, is something called reverse coding. First of all, what is this reverse coding? Well, it's like this. Some of you may have been told when you're setting up your questionnaires. Can I take this away now? And I'll talk to you as I'm doing this. Some of you may have been told by your professors as you're setting up your questionnaires is to say mix the questions up so that some of them are kind of negatively or worded compared to the other ones. What do I mean by negatively worded? Well, what I mean is that suppose I've got a questionnaire which is trying to assess people's attitude to SPSS software. If all your statements are phrased in terms of positives, then people could get complacent when they're filling questionnaire. They'll just go tick 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 near the bottom because it's always strongly agree, right? So to make them think a bit, you might want to write something opposite. For example, let's do a question 2 here. Let's write it. Give you an example of something that says reverse oppositely worded. Say I prefer what's that pop? God sakes. Okay, I prefer Excel to SPSS. SPSS. Right, and it's still strongly disagree. Undecided, agree, and strongly agree. Right, well, why is this kind of reverse worded to this? It's because, say that most of the questions are like this, whether it's positives, positive attitude, so as you're going down, as the scale goes higher, it means there's a stronger positive attitude to SPSS. Positive, negative. Well, in this case, I prefer Excel to SPSS, so if you the more you agree with this, the more kind of negative attitude you have to SPSS. Can you see the direction here? That say most of the ones are like question 1 for measuring attitude to SPSS. As you the more you agree, the kind of more positive is your attitude towards SPSS. But here is a reverse. This is what I call it's a reverse worded one. So the higher you the more you agree with it, that means the more negative is your attitude towards SPSS. Because in this case, the more you strongly prefer Excel to SPSS, that means, it's more negative is your attitude towards SPSS. So, but when we're entering this into SPSS, we have to do something called reverse coding, because basically we have to, if we're going to do the analysis, we've got to have all these questions that are consistent with each other. Otherwise, we can't compare these agrees and disagrees things. So these have got to be consistent. So if everything, we've got to get everything to be in terms of measuring degrees of positive attitude to SPSS in the same direction. In other words, the further down you go, that means the more positive is your attitude towards SPSS. Okay, so yeah. So the thing is, we want the questions so that they're measuring the same direction of attitude in SPSS. Okay, so just to say why we might want to do this again, well, the reason why we want to do this, you might chuck in, put in a few of reverse worded questions, just so that the respondent hopefully will force them to think and not fall asleep as answering the questionnaire. Okay, and also you can pick out inconsistencies if someone's going to do 555 for every single one, then obviously you can see that they're not treating it seriously, because then some questions will be inconsistent with the reverse coded ones. Alright, so how do we deal with reverse coded, entering reverse coded question? What you do is that for all the other questions in terms of positive attitudes, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so the higher it is, the more strongly you agree it is. When we've got something that is reverse worded, you just simply reverse these. So instead of going from 1 to 5, from strongly disagree to agree, you're going to go backwards. So it's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the way you enter this is just going to be the same as for this guy. So in this case, if somebody ticks this one, it's coded 1. Low number means that they have a lowest kind of positive attitude to SPSS, to this, judged by this question. Okay, well, I can't claim that I have answered all the questions relevant for data entry for Likert scales, but I hope it's got you started and got you thinking. Alright then,